Last offseason, it was all about helping Bryce Young. This offseason, should it be about maximizing what the Panthers now have in Bryce Young? We'll talk about the state of the Carolina Panthers offense pre-free agency right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, the part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays, like tomorrow, throughout the offseason, I'm right here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. Here's what you got to do. Either at me or DM me over on Twitter or X, if you want to call it that. Doesn't matter. The handle's at Julian Council, so either at me or DM me to get those questions in for tomorrow's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. This episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Over the last 2 weeks, we have looked at every single position group on the Panthers offense, looked at the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers, the tight ends, the offensive guards and centers, and the offensive tackles here in Carolina. Today, let's take a look at the state of the Carolina Panthers offense heading into free agency in 2025. And starting off with, of course, the quarterback, Bryce Young. This time last offseason for the Panthers, it was all about helping Bryce Young. You saw what happened in 2023. He had 4 different play callers. It was Frank Reich, then Thomas Brown, then Frank Reich, then Thomas Brown. Again, it was just too many cooks there in the kitchen, too many guys in Bryce Young's ear. They were more focused on Bryce Young being able to go out there and play immediately and not necessarily focused on the fundamentals of whether Bryce Young truly was ready to step into the QB1 job. And we saw how things played out this past season where Bryce was benched, Andy Dalton came in, and then Bryce talked about how Andy Dalton really helped him. And all the reporting has been about Bryce being able to see Andy Dalton lead the locker room and understanding, oh, that's how I'm supposed to conduct myself within an NFL locker room. Had that happened in 2023, maybe we avoid what happened in weeks 1 and weeks 2 of 2024. And maybe we avoid a lot of what happened in 2023 overall, but probably not, because they had to start 7 different left guards, 8 different right guards. It was a complete travesty on the offensive line. The receivers, not named Adam Thielen, could not get open. When they got open, they could not catch the ball. When by a miracle they got open and they caught the ball, they could not do anything with it. So the Panthers had to help Bryce Young with the coaching staff that went out there, and they got Dave Canales, who had done wonders in the previous 2 seasons in Seattle with Geno Smith and a year ago with Baker Mayfield in Tampa. So they wanted him to do for what he did with Geno, what he did with Baker, for Bryce Young this past season in Carolina. They went out there and they signed Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis to a bunch of money on the first day of the legal negotiating period. They moved Austin Corbett from right guard over to center, so Bryce would have a veteran presence there again in 2024. They traded for Deontay Johnson in the attempt that he would be the Panthers' de facto number 1 receiver in 2024. They drafted Xavier Legette, Jonathan Brooks, Jatavion Sanders. They did all that they could to help Bryce Young. And unfortunately, weeks 1 and 2 at New Orleans at home against Chargers, it did not look like Bryce Young was willing to accept the help the Carolina Panthers had given him. He had plenty of time in the pocket, and yet his first pass of the season was an interception. He looked rattled. He did not look like he had any confidence at all, and he was a shell of the guy that I had seen and a lot of people had seen at joint practice against the Jets, and certainly the guy we saw in that one series against Buffalo in the preseason, albeit against the Bills 2s and 3s. That was not the Bryce Young that we witnessed weeks 1 and week 2, as that was just, man, really bad for the Carolina Panthers. But they benched him. They brought him back in. He gained confidence. He earned back the job and showed that clearly the Panthers did enough for Bryce Young to help him out last offseason by spending all that money on those two guards who both played 16 games this past season. By moving Corbett there, did not work out as he got injured, but you saw Cade Mays play well at center. You saw Brady Christensen play well. Overall, the offensive line, there was not significant drop-off like we saw a year ago when guys went down with injuries. The receiving core was much better this past season, even if maybe Xavier Legette hasn't shown the on-field ability just yet to be a number one wide receiver. Adam Thielen was excellent again when he was out there. Legette was impressive still. You saw what Jalen Coker did as an undrafted free agent. David Moore had the best year he's had since 2020. The Panthers' offensive line combined with the run game as well with Chuba Hubbard, like it was all so much better. It was competent around Bryce, and so competent that Bryce Young, once he decided to also be competent, from weeks 9 to the end of the season, he was the 6th highest graded player at quarterback in the NFL, only behind Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, and Baker Mayfield. So to get top 6, top 10 quarterback play out of Bryce in the second half of the season, that now has answered the biggest question heading into 2024 of what do you have in Bryce Young? Well, what you have in Bryce Young is your starter in 2025, and potentially if things keep trending the way they've gone over the last 9-10 weeks of the season, you have your franchise quarterback finally here in Carolina after years of wandering around in the wilderness and trying guys for 1 year, then letting them go after that season to be your starting quarterback. It looks like Bryce Young will be that guy. So last year was all about helping Bryce Young. This year, as far as the offense go, it should be about maximizing what you now have in Bryce Young. You want your quarterback to obviously elevate the talent around him, but you also have to get him the requisite talent in order to have the kind of success that you would expect your quarterback at the skill level Bryce Young showed us in the second half of the season and maybe continues to build upon can show on a weekly basis. So when I look at it, like, of course, there's still questions on the offensive line as far as the contract of Taylor Moton and what to do with that cap hit. There's questions about who's going to be starting center, but overall, you know, the offensive line's going to be fine. You're going to have Icky back at left tackle. You're going to have Damian Lewis at left guard. You're going to either have Austin Corbett or Cade Mays or someone capable of playing center. At right guard, you're going to have Robert Hunt again. And then at right tackle, it's either Moton or I'm sure somebody who will be capable. Like, I'm not super concerned about the offensive line at all. The talent will be there. The wide receivers are in a much better spot than they were a season ago at this point in time in the offseason. Thielen looks like he's coming back, has not said anything since he came out after locker room or on locker room cleanout day saying that he may retire. At least he's going to contemplate it for the third off season in a row, and he hasn't said anything. So I would imagine he's coming back to Carolina. You got Legette coming back. You have Coker coming back. I would expect David Moore, who's a unrestricted free agent, to also come back. And if they can add another piece there, that will help elevate the floor there of that offensive line. Tight end, certainly need to add more to that spot as Tommy Trimble, Ian Thomas, Felipe Franks, all three of those guys are free agents. Frank's more of a special teams guy. Thomas, it should be the end of the road for him in Carolina. But Tommy Trimble, we'll see what happens there. Either way, you need to add somebody else there alongside Jatavion Sanders and possibly Trimble. And then at running back, you got Chuba coming back off of a 1,000-yard rushing season. He's shown to be the workhorse. He's shown to be a big part of this offense, but they got to find somebody to back him up. Miles Sanders, current contract, don't necessarily think he'd be the guy on the current deal. Now, if they want to rework it, if he's willing to do that, I'm all good with that. Jonathan Brooks, probably not going to be ready to go week 1, and who knows when that will be in 2025. They maybe burned that pick. Not quite sure whether that's true or not. We got to let things play out down the road here in Carolina, but they need to add a backup. But overall, you got a quarterback, it looks like. Your offensive line, that's pretty good. Wide receivers, much better than they were. Still wouldn't say they're top half of the NFL level wide receivers just yet. Now, there's some couple of young guys in there who could certainly grow into that down the road, but that's still to be determined. Tight end, questions, running back, not really. This offense is in a much better spot than it was February 6th of 2024. Now sitting here on February 6th of 2025, one calendar year later, they're much better. It's not about helping Bryce Young. It's about maximizing now what you have in Bryce Young if you're Dan Morgan, Brant Tillis, Dave Canales, and the rest of the Carolina Panthers brass heading into free agency a month from now in March. I have three big questions. We've gone over these over the last couple of weeks when looking at each of these position groups. Three big questions pertaining to the offense. Talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Last offseason for the Panthers offense, and really for the Panthers as an organization, it was about helping Bryce Young. And Dan Morgan, Brant Tillis, Dave Canales, they all succeeded in helping Bryce Young with all the additions that they made with the roster this time a year ago, really, 11 months ago, back in March and even in April with the NFL draft. And now I'm looking at the offense and I'm thinking that they need to try to maximize what they have in Bryce. Like, this is year 3. Look at the landscape of the NFC South. The New Orleans Saints, who will be hosting the Super Bowl at the Caesars Superdome on Sunday, still do not have a head coach. It appears that Kellen Moore, who is the OC of the Philadelphia Eagles, is the leader in the clubhouse, but there's still a possibility he doesn't take the job. But that seems to be the expectation from all the reporting out there. Either way, Kellen Moore ain't going to do anything with the Saints coming up this fall. So that's a team that has no shot at winning the division. Go ahead, quote me, clip it out, whatever you want to do, Saints fans out there, if you even watch this show for whatever reason, because you love me, of course. But I'm not worried about the Saints. The Bucks, yeah, concerned there, but they're going to be throwing out another offensive coordinator. They've gone from Byron Leftwich to Dave Canales to Liam Cohen, who was going to stay, but decided, actually, no, I can't give up on my dream of living in Duval, or however the hell he said it. That was just so bad, man. And now they're going to have, I forgot who the other guy is, some new dude I've never heard of. So their fourth coordinator, 4 seasons. That's the situation in Tampa. Baker's still there. I imagine Mike Evans will still be there. Chris Godwin is a free agent, so we'll see how that works out. Tampa maybe takes a step back. Atlanta, it's Atlanta. So there's a possibility with the offense getting better, maximizing what they have in Bryce Young. And certainly we'll talk about the defense over the next couple of weeks and what needs to change over there in order for Carolina to truly be a contender. That maybe they're not that far away from actually being NFC South title contenders coming up this fall in 2025. So that's why you can't sit here and wait. You have a young quarterback who is looking pretty good. Like Baker, that's a sure thing, I think, at this point in time in Tampa. It's not just the past 2 seasons, it's also what he did in Cleveland, especially when went to the playoffs that one time. So he's a sure thing. New Orleans does not have one. Michael Penix Jr., love what he did at Washington. Still got to find out about that. But Bryce Young is looking more and more like a sure thing after what we saw in those final 9 games of the 2024 season. But 3 questions that I do have when it pertains to this Carolina Panthers offense prior to free agency. Number 1, will the Panthers pursue a wide receiver 1? And this goes into maximizing what you have with Bryce Young. And I have seen discussions of maybe, and I think it was Matt Miller, who now works for ESPN. He put out a 2-round mock draft the other day, and he did mention at 8th overall, where I think he had the Panthers taking an edge rusher. I don't quite remember off the top of my head, but he did mention in that graph about Carolina maybe looking at a wide receiver then. Someone asked me on Friday for the mailbag, and at me or DM me at Julian Council, get your question in for tomorrow's mailbag. Someone had asked me about Teteroa McMillan out of Arizona, who had been mocked by a couple of outlets to go to Carolina. And I wouldn't hate that, because that would go into maximizing what you have in Bryce Young, but there's other free agency options available. Stephon Diggs, but he tore his ACL, and he's been a great player, but I don't know. At this point in time, you want to deal with all that comes with dealing with the Stephon Diggs. And if you're going to get the production that lets you just not worry about all of that. T. Higgins, he is the apple of my eye when it comes to free agent wide receivers in this upcoming market. And he is somebody that I would love to bring closer back to home, even though Cincinnati is probably not that far from Knoxville anyways, but still come back to the Carolinas T and be number one wide receiver in Carolina. Keenan Allen, apparently his cousin, listens to the show. Shout out to Cedric. And he was telling me that Keenan comes back to Carolina all the time, to North Carolina every summer. And, that's great. So I was like, all right, we'll tell your cousin to come back home permanently. He said he would love that. So, all right, Cedric, I'm counting on you to go out there and talk to your boy and tell him, hey, Julian Council, host of Locked On Panthers, he's out here talking about, Carolina needs number one wide receiver. You went out there and you did some good things with Caleb Williams last year, but you don't want to be in cold ass Chicago. You've been out there in Cali basically since you were 18 years old. Why not come home and stay home? So, Cedric, talk to your boy, all right? So that's an option. Amari Cooper, not that interested. Chris Godwin could be interesting for sure. Like Higgins, Godwin, those are the top two guys. And of course, there's going to be trade talks, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow, but Garrett Wilson, talked about him a couple of weeks ago. A lot of Panther fans are like, ooh, look at this guy talking good about Bryce over there on Twitter. That means he must want to play here. Slow down, take a deep breath, because the Jets had to bring a new head coach in Aaron Glenn, a new GM who I have never heard of and probably won't have success because it's the Jets. But that GM is probably not going to be giving up Garrett Wilson just for the 8th overall pick. Maybe he will, but I don't know if I'm Woody Johnson, the owner, which thank God I'm not, but I guess I kind of wish I was because I'd be full of money. But still, I would be one of the most hated people in New York every year because my team sucks. But with that aside, I don't know if Woody Johnson, even his little brother Chris, are going to allow their new GM to trade away like their best player. I know quarterback situation's confusing. Garrett Wilson has certainly let it be known to the media. He has not been happy the last couple of seasons with the way the offense has performed, with some very colorful locker room conversations post-game. I would love it. I don't understand necessarily why the Jets would do that. Cooper Kupp, he came out on Twitter, and it's been a busy Super Bowl week aside from like the actual Super Bowl, which I don't feel like there's a lot of hype around. There's been a ton of hype around Myles Garrett asking out of Cleveland. And of course, I was asked immediately on Twitter whether he was coming to Carolina potentially. Again, we'll talk about that tomorrow on the mailbag. Cooper Kupp, he came out and said the Rams told him, hey, it's over, Coop. We're done. We're moving on. And that could make some sense possibly for Carolina. I do think it would be in their best interest to really try to identify somebody who could be their long-term number one. I don't believe Lee gets that. I never felt like he was. And I'm not saying that he can't be a good player for the Panthers. I'm just saying I don't think he's ever going to be that number one top tier kind of receiver that you want. Like, I don't think he's going to be as good as DJ Moore was in Carolina. And if you know me, I never really felt like DJ Moore was like, I mean, he's really good, obviously, but I never saw him as like one of those elite guys. I don't think anyone believes that, but DJ's gone out there produced. Like, I don't think he's going to give you the DJ Moore type of production ever in Carolina. Go find someone who can do that, and maybe find someone who's a little bit better than DJ Moore. And they made that decision, they being Scott Fitter, and Dan Morgan's a part of that, of believing when they traded up to get the number one overall pick to later take Bryce Young, they felt like it'd be easier to get a wide receiver down the road to replace DJ Moore than it would be to replace Brian Burns, which so far they have not done, and to replace Derek Brown, which of course he's still around in Carolina. So we'll see just how easy that is in their second offseason attempting to do just that. Of course, it takes some time. The second question, what are they going to do at center? Austin Corbett has missed a ton of games the last 2 seasons, torn ACL, torn meniscus, both in the same knee, then had the biceps tear this past year in that game in Chicago. He's a vet, a guy that I think would work really well with Bryce moving forward, and probably someone you can get on the cheap. And I do think it would make a lot of sense if saying he wants to be here. And the Panthers have not given any indication to him that they want to bring him back, but if they do, which I think they should, let him compete with Cade Mays, who was a really pleasant surprise. He was cut from the team, was on the Giants practice squad, signed off the practice squad, played really well against Chris Jones and against Dexter Lawrence in back-to-back weeks with of course, a bye sandwich in between that game in Munich and the game in Uptown Charlotte, where really things changed with that locker room and how they viewed Bryce Young and him really taking that leadership role within the locker room as the franchise quarterback and showing the things a lot of those guys wanted to see from him, even back in 2023 when everything was going wrong. Who's going to play center? Like, I think it would be Cade Mays or Austin Corbett. I don't think Christensen, I feel like he's going to probably price himself out just based off of his flexibility, and teams out there likely willing to give him a starting role. I don't see one currently for him on this roster unless they move on from Moton. And speaking of Taylor Moton, that's question number 3. How will they handle Taylor Moton's contract? The cap space Carolina has right now, according to overthecap.com, is $20.8 million. He has a $31.3 million cap hit. That is the highest cap total for any player on the Panthers roster. They've restructured his deal every offseason since he signed that extension back in the summer of 2021. They could cut him. That would save them $12.7 million. Wouldn't be ideal unless they're going to bring Brady Christensen back to play right tackle, which he did not play last year. They would bring in Josh Nijman in those situations, and it would play Brady Christensen at left tackle whenever Ike Ekwonu missed time. They could restructure and save $12.1 million. Or they could do my preferred scenario, which is extend Moton, and that would save just under $13 million at $12.9 million. He is due a $3 million roster bonus on the third day of the new league year. That will be Friday, March 14th. And he has a bunch of void years, which is because of all the restructuring and why the cap hit is what it is. So you got to figure out what the offensive line is going to look like as far as the starters go. I do think depth-wise, you're going to have Josh Nijman probably back. We'll see how that plays out. But you have Chandler Zavala, who played really well. And if you have those front 5 back again, you have to feel good about the Panthers offensive line and what this offense could be capable of in 2025. What could this offense be capable of in 2025? We'll take an early look, even though still got to answer the questions I just had and see how the roster shakes out. We'll take an early look at what the expectations could be for the Carolina Panthers offense in 2025 here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What do you want your 2025 story to be? Every January brings a new chapter, 365 blank pages waiting for you to fill. If there's a part of your life you want to rewrite or a plot twist you've been craving, why wait? Life isn't about fleeting resolutions. It's about taking control and becoming the author of your own story. Think of therapy as a personal editor, helping you craft the life you deserve. It's not just for crisis situations. Therapy can help you develop healthier coping strategies, improve your relationships, and empower you to be the best version of yourself. Whether you're facing a challenge or just looking for personal growth, therapy is a powerful tool to help guide your journey. Whether it's learning how to set up boundaries or tackling stress in new ways, therapy can help you develop skills for a better tomorrow. Even if you've never tried therapy, the benefits are clear. Finding someone to talk to and gaining fresh perspectives can make all the difference in how you navigate life's ups and downs. Write your story at BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So, what should the expectations be for the Carolina Panthers offense in 2025? It is only February 6th, 2025. We are a very long way away from knowing what this roster is actually going to look like. And I guess we're not that far, but we are as far as who's actually going to be on the team and when they're going to actually play some games. And coming up on March 10th, next month, that will be the first day of the legal negotiating period. Then on March 12th, 4 p.m. Eastern time, that will be beginning of the new league year, the official beginning of free agency. And then the draft is later on there in April. So we are right now in the critical roster building portion of the NFL season, and a portion of the season a lot of people love, as we had the Senior Bowl last week, got the Combine coming up at the end of the month. There's going to be, of course, the draft, all of that. I'm excited. I personally love free agency and all that plays out when looking at some players who've actually played and what they've done for teams and how they could slide into Carolina, whatever teams they go to. So I'm excited to see how all this plays out, certainly. And just looking at things right now, you got quarterback, you got offensive line, you got running back, you got wide receiver, you got tight end. Those are the position groups here for the offense. And the top two that matter the most, in my opinion, are quarterback and offensive line. Like when I'm looking at a football team, I'm looking at, are they any good in the trenches? Do they have a quarterback? Okay, cool. And special teams as well. Like that is a third phase that people don't really look at a lot, but we have seen kickers will cost you games. Can your punter flip the field? That is important, obviously. But looking at the offense, most important things are the quarterback in the offensive line. And based off of what we last saw, quarterback, check. Offensive line, check. And that's the starting point. If you have a capable quarterback who can be a difference maker, which Bryce Young certainly was in Atlanta on week 18 and certainly was in the final 9 games of the season, and an offensive line to protect him and to be able to road grade as check with the running back as well, you have a chance to compete. And I said last year, and there's plenty of things I get wrong, but I felt like they would be better alone just because the offensive line would be better. When the Panthers' offensive line has been a disaster, like it was in 2023, they have sucked. Look at it in 2021. They were bad. When it's been healthy, 2022, you turn things around. You're right there in the cusp of winning division. This past year, you finished out 4-5 in the final 9 games. And overall, the defense was bad, but overall, the offensive line was never a problem. So when it's been good, that has been the Panthers' best years in recent memory. And even when they were good teams, like they have never had a good football team and had a bad offensive line. There is no such thing as a good football team that has a bad offensive line. It just does not happen. If you cannot win up front, you cannot win football games. And it does not matter who's standing back there as the quarterback. But who's standing back there is Bryce Young. And how Bryce Young played in the final 9 weeks makes me confident in what he can do moving forward in 2025 and possibly beyond. And the offensive line, not really concerned there. Chuba Hubbard, he was excellent last year, was really good the year prior. As long as he stays healthy and they can find some backups there, running back is not a question. Wide receiver, the only question to me is how much better is this group going to get? And it's not just adding to it. It's what are you getting at a 35-year-old Adam Thielen? It's what are you getting in year 2 of Jalen Coker and Xavier Legette? And right now, I feel a little bit more confident in what you're certainly going to get out of Coker. I did make a prediction recently that I thought that Legette would have better numbers, and I'm hoping that's going to be the case. But we got to see more out of him as well. But it's the second year for those guys to take a step forward, and maybe we see that big jump. But I do think that that group needs to be better. And I look at the offense overall, and you look at the skill positions, like who are the difference makers? While Chuba Hubbard's a really good player at running back, he's not Christian McCaffrey. This isn't Saquon Barkley we're talking about. Good player, but he's not necessarily a difference maker in the NFL. He's a guy you can win with, but he's not necessarily a guy you're winning because. And we saw San Francisco's won because of McCaffrey. The Eagles they're in the Super Bowl, man, because of Saquon Barkley. So I'm just looking for the difference makers. I don't see them right now. They can emerge. Thielen used to be one. He's not going to be one at 35, I don't think. Legette could be one, maybe. Coker could be one. But right now, I just don't see those offensively. Tight end, JT Sanders, I expect a lot more. I'm hoping to see the guy that we saw between weeks 4 and 12 before the neck injury and before Dave Canales or whatever didn't implement him in the offense, utilize him in the final 5 weeks of the season. I'm expecting him to look better. I'm expecting really all those second-year guys on this offense to play better. So while I do think offensive line, quarterback, finally, for the first time in a long time going into the offseason, appear to be stable, and running back as well. Receiver, good talent there. Certainly in the future could be even better. I don't see the difference makers around the quarterback. And there's still questions whether the quarterback truly will be that, to sit here and think that, all of a sudden it's going to be a top 10 offense in 2025. But they absolutely can be better than what they were this past year. Because think about it. Week 1, week 2, quarterback play was horrendous. After weeks 3 and 4 of Andy, the quarterback play was not great when Andy was in there. Bryce's first game wasn't great. And even the games they're winning against the Saints and the Giants wasn't like he was putting up big-time numbers. It really felt like that game against Atlanta was a culmination of things, and possibly he's not going to score 5 touchdowns every week, obviously, but that could be more of the norm as far as just the way he played and the numbers can put up. Again, not scoring 5 touchdowns every week out of him. So looking at some of the numbers, they ranked 24th in offensive DVOA and 25th in offensive EPA. They can't find a way to be in the top half of the NFL. They can't be in the teens, can't be like 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th. Like they can't be right there. This upcoming season, if they add to the receiver core, figure things out there tight end wise and make the right decisions as far as offensive line goes. And of course, got to stay healthy. They were 23rd in scoring offense at 20.1 points per game. They can't be better than that this upcoming year. 29th in total yards. I imagine that would be better. 9th in red zone offense, which was something that I love to see. But how many times did they fail in the red zone and not come away with 7 points? That goes with the scoring offense as well. Improve there. You're already top 10. You can't take a step better. If you're already top 10 this year with this offense, you can't be top 5 maybe next year. 26 and third down offense. Could stay on the field some of the times this season. I'm expecting this to be right there around a middle of the road offense. Not a middling offense, which they were this season for the most part, but a team that can be right there around 14, 15, 16, 17, right there in the middle of the league and knocking on the door of potentially becoming one of the top 10 units moving forward as long as the players develop, health stays where they need to go, and this team continues to grow in the way that we want them to here in Carolina. So that's going to wrap up this look at the state of the Carolina Panthers offense here on Locked On Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Hosted by yours truly again, Julian Council. Subscribe or follow the show free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council, because tomorrow it is Friday, which means I'm answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, which means you have to at me or DM me. And yes, you have to right now. Get out your phone, get on your laptop, do whatever you got to do, iPad, Surface Pro, whatever it may be, and at me or DM me with your Panthers questions for the weekly Friday mailbag right here on the Locked On Panthers. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Friday.